There was a couple that reported strange things in Bernardo, New Mexico. One of them would end up missing. This is a story about John and Elizabeth. John was a well-known guy. He was well-known in Bernardo, New Mexico, as well as a town that was a little more south of that known as Socorro. John was a well-known mechanic. He worked on all things, cars and trucks. He would even work on four-wheelers for people who had them. He was just well-known. He was a real likable guy. People would talk to him. He would talk back. People just knew him. He was that guy who was just real friendly, and he liked to work on stuff. And he actually was fair. He did good work at a fair price. So people knew John. They knew him real well. John was about in his 20s, and he decided to move to Albuquerque because Socorro had good work, but there wasn't that much. It was steady but not busy. He was never overwhelmed with work, and he felt like he could make more money. So John decided to move to Albuquerque, and he was doing pretty good. He was working at a local car dealership here in Albuquerque and just doing good, and he was your average guy. He was only 20-some years old, so he was going to bars and having fun. He liked to go dancing. He liked to just go sit at the bar, go have a few drinks. Occasionally he'd go to the casino. He didn't really like to gamble. He just liked to be social. So he would go out and stuff like that. And one night he was just having a bad day. He was at a bar, and he didn't want to dance or nothing. He was just sitting there and he was already done. He had about 5 drinks and he was ready to go home. He didn't want to drink and drive too hard. So he was like, that was a lot already, So he was like, I need to cut it out. He was about to leave. And this red-headed girl, a real beautiful girl, walked up to him and touched his hand, and she started talking to him, and this ended up being Elizabeth. This is how he met Elizabeth. Elizabeth was intrigued with John because John had real oily hands. His hands were real dirty. And she was like, wow, are you a mechanic? And he was like, yes, I actually am. And she was real intrigued by it because her father was actually a mechanic and her dad had just passed away. So her seeing that, it kind of reminded her of her dad, in a way. So she was talking to John, and she was just like, hey, maybe we should hang out. Maybe you can show me some stuff on cars and stuff like that. Because she really liked John, too, She was like, she really liked his personality. And John liked Elizabeth, too. It was like love at first sight, almost. It was like they had knew each other their whole life growing up when they were kids, and they got separated, and then they just, reunited again. Because they just, they set it off, They just knew, it's like they knew each other. And so they started hanging out more, and John would show Elizabeth stuff on the cars, and stuff like that. And she was getting, happier and happier, but John would always complain on how he missed home, He was like, because he was already close to 30. He had lived there for a good, 5+ years. And he was like, I want to move back to Bernardo, There's really nothing out there. There's really no one to mess with us. We're kind of have our own privacy, and then we could build a garage there so I can work on cars, and I'll have clientele from Albuquerque because Albuquerque's only an hour away, and then I'll have clientele from Socorro as well. So he was trying to convince Elizabeth. She was kind of with it, yeah, but was always kind of pushing it on the back burner, I still got to figure stuff here, because she was a waitress. She would take care of her mom and stuff like that. She was not really a full-time worker. She would work part-time, but a little bit more, just to make money and help out, but she was more worried about taking care of her mom. So she was kind of worried about leaving her mom too, but John convinced her that Bernardo's only an hour away, and we can just stay over there, and if your mom needs us, we can just fly over here. It'll take us 45 minutes if we're going a little faster. So he ended up convincing her a little bit, and she was like, okay, well, maybe if you find something at a good price, we'll talk about it more. Comes to find out, John waits. He's a patient guy, and he ends up finding a good deal. He finds 5 acres of land for $2,500, which is a steal. That's $500 an acre, So he buys it. He don't even ask Elizabeth. He just buys it because he has a little bit of cash. He's not well off, but he has a savings, So he buys the property, and then he ends up going and telling Elizabeth. Elizabeth is kind of excited, but kind of not, because she's excited for John, but she's not really excited to leave, but she pretty much promised him, and she loves John, so she's willing to go with him. She don't want to be homesick from Albuquerque either, and John's really excited. So John ends up going to the property back and forth because there's weeds on the land, and he don't want to really rent a tractor because, like I said, he has money, but he's not well off, So he was like, why pay money when I can just do them all by hand? So he pretty much just goes there two days a week, two days a week on the weekends. Saturdays and Sundays he would go, and he would just cut all these weeds by hand, and then he would just burn them. And unfortunately, the land was so huge that the weeds were starting to grow on the parts. By the time he was even getting to other parts, it'd start growing, So he was getting a little frustrated, but he was getting it done. And then a little bit of time goes by, and he ended up finally convincing Elizabeth, let's go to Bernardo, okay? Like, he's kind of like put his foot down, like, hey, this is what I want to do. And he wasn't necessarily, it wasn't a fight or nothing. It was just like, this is what I want to do. So she agrees. They go and get a loan from the bank so they can rent a trailer, like a mobile home. And then they build themselves it was a nice 4-car garage, like a big flat garage enough to fit 4 cars in, but like a high one so he can put a lift in. And he was working on cars there. And he had 5 acres of land, so he could park as much cars as he wanted to outside. It was in Bernardo. There's no one out there like at all to complain, about someone having too many cars or anything like that. So they end up building the garage, and they have the trailer set there, and then they end up getting a well dug so they can have fresh water. And then they got electricity put in, because electricity, they had to get a little box installed and stuff like that. But there's not really city water or nothing. You have to dig a well in order to get water. If not, you're not going to get water. You'll have to haul it from somewhere else. So they get a well and everything dug, and he still keeps going back and forth from Albuquerque. They're still living in Albuquerque, and Elizabeth would go with him, one day out of the week sometimes just to go check it out. And she slowly started to fall in love with Bernardo. She was like, man, she loved the wildlife. There was box turtles, there was wild horses. She would see pronghorn sheep. On occasion, they'd see a Gila monster, which is like a beaded lizard, a real rare seeing lizard that you see. They're kind of venomous. They're native to North America, especially in the Southwest. And they're real cool looking, They're like orange and black, real beaded skin and stuff like that. So she'd see all that stuff, and then she would see the skies. The skies, she fell in love with them. Some days the sky would be orange and purple. The other days it'd be like red and yellow. And they would just change in the clouds, and she would see the wild horses running in the distance, and it seemed peaceful to her, and it was just everything that she kind of wanted. She still just didn't want to leave yet, because she didn't want to leave her mom, alone. But they ended up getting everything situated, going back and forth, and Elizabeth was still staying in Albuquerque pretty much. But it got to the point pretty much where John was staying on the weekends over there at the property to clean it out, and he was slowly taking cars and stuff like that. There was a few properties next to their property, but they weren't that close. They were like a few football field lengths away. One of the properties was a gentleman named Larry. Larry was a heavy, tall, stocky Hispanic male. Larry was a real nice guy. It was no secret in Bernardo, though, that he was the town drunk. People didn't take him serious. He became a real heavy alcoholic after he lost his family in a car accident. He had stayed home, and his wife and daughter went to Albuquerque and came home, and they got hit by a drunk driver when he was going head on, and he lost his family, unfortunately. So Larry was kind of was a little crazy, and he drank a lot, and he just would miss his family, and he kind of stayed to himself. But for some reason, Larry liked John, and John liked Larry. They would wave at each other, say hi. Larry would actually watch John's property for him. He would, let him know, hey, I'm here on the weekends, but I'm leaving on the weekdays and stuff like that. And so pretty much Larry would watch his property for him, and John would keep going back and forth. And like I said, he had convinced Elizabeth to move, but she was still kind of hesitant to move. So John keeps going back and forth from Albuquerque to Bernardo, and one day John has a trailer with 2 cars. He's taking them to Bernardo so he can work on them. He has 2 people in Albuquerque that he's working on their cars. He told them to give them about a month, It was big stuff like transmission. One was a transmission, one was an engine. So he had them, and he was taking them to Bernardo. And he arrived on his property. He noticed that the gate was open. And he's like, what's going on? I always lock my gate. If anyone's here, they lock the gate. It's supposed to just be me and Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth is here, I'm here, and I lock the gate. What's going on? Larry watches my property too. What's going on here? So John gets out of his truck, and he walks around to the gate, and he looks around to see if he can find a lock, his chain, anything, because he has a pretty long chain with a lock on it, a master lock, and he can't find it, and the gate's just wide open. So John's just curious. He's like, what's going on here? I locked it. I know for a fact I lock it. I double checked it. So he goes back to his truck, and he gets in. He pulls up next to the trailer, and he notices all the windows are busted out. And he's like, what's going on? Was there a crazy storm, like a sandstorm or something? Was there a little dust devil that threw something in through the windows? But it's weird because they're busted all around, he notices. He drives around, and he notices they're all busted out. And then he parks there, and he gets out, and he goes inside, and he notices there's writing on the wall. It says, not here. And he's like, what is that? What? It looks like someone pretty much wrote it with their hands, not here, just smudged it with their hands. And it looks like blood. And he gets a little closer, and he's like, I'm pretty sure it's blood. It's like burgundy, on his white walls. So John's terrified. He freaking runs outside. He grabs his shotgun because he has a shotgun in the back of his bench of his seat. He goes by his garage and he notices there's a round formation of rocks. Pretty decent rocks. They're like the size of his head, and they're in a perfect circle. And he notices that there's char inside that circle. And on top of that char, there's a head. It's a goat head with horns and fur still intact. So John's like terrified. He runs to his truck with the shotgun as fast as he can. He's like, I'm trying to get out of here. He still has the trailer. He peels out. He's not even worried about the cars or nothing, man. He just takes off. And when he's leaving the property, he's right by the highway and he notices Larry's waving at him like, hey, hey, hey. So John's like, oh, okay, that's a friend. I'm going to go over there and stop him. Maybe he'll know something because he's panicking. He don't know what the hell's going on. So he pulls into the property and Larry's like, hey, what's up, man? And John gets out the shotgun. He's like, hey, he's freaking out. And Larry assures him, he's like, hey, dude, I'm your friend. Like, can you please put that away? You're making me feel uncomfortable. Like, I know you're uneasy right now. I don't know why, but you seem pretty uneasy. Can you please put the shotgun down? So he convinces John to put the shotgun down. He puts it back into his truck behind the seat, puts it away. He goes and talks to Larry. And Larry's like, hey, man, did you have some family here? Like on Wednesday, like, did you guys have like a housewarming party or something like that? And he was like, no, like, I didn't have no one here. And he's like, matter of fact, my gate was open and my windows are busted out and there's a freaking weird pit with a goat head in it. And there's writing in my wall that says not here. And Larry freaks out. He's like, oh my goodness. Because there's a story of a cult that lives in Bernardo. And it pretty much says that cult does not want anyone there, especially anyone that believes in God. They believe that land right there belongs to the devil himself, and their like sole job is to protect it and make sure no one holy lives there, and they're gonna do the devil's work to make sure no one can even pray in that area or nothing. That's the devil's land. They make sure of it. Like, they don't want no one new moving in there, nothing. They try to scare anyone away, and people have heard about this cult. Some people claim that they see him, and Larry, he claims that he had seen them walking down the highway one day. He never seen faces. He's seen 5 people walking with cloaks with their faces covered, and he said he could just barely see their mouths and their chin with a hood on. He said they were walking like that, and he can only see their mouths and nothing else. And he said after that, he never wanted to see them again. He was terrified because he was a Christian man. People thought he was crazy, but he prayed every night. He prayed to God before he ate dinner, breakfast, lunch, everything. He believed in God, and he wasn't afraid to let people know that. And he was wondering why they never messed with him. But he had heard about this, and he was pretty convinced that that's who it was. Because he told John, he was like, well, I seen about 10 people there. I couldn't really see who they were because they were by the fire. And the fire is bright, and I was behind them, so they just looked like shadows, people walking around, and I just assumed it was you, dude. Like, I don't know what was going on. And John assured him, he was like, no, I was not here. No one was supposed to be here. I don't know who that was. So Larry's like, okay, I'm pretty sure it was them. So after that, John, he's like, I don't want Elizabeth to hear about this. I don't want her to know about it. She barely even wants to move out here. If she hears that there's a freaking satanic cult out here, what the hell is she going to think? She's not, especially if they're over there in our land that we just bought, busted out all of our windows and everything. So John goes all the way to Las Lunas, to Walmart, and he goes and buys some paint and stuff like that. And he goes back and he paints the letters on the wall and stuff like that. He gets his shovels. And he gets rid of the char and stuff. He gets the rocks, throws them in his truck, hauls them out of the property, gets them out of there. He figures that he'll fix the windows next week because he don't really have that much money or time. He needs to go back so he don't look suspicious to Elizabeth. So he ends up going back to Albuquerque. He looks a little shook. Elizabeth's like, hey, are you okay? She just thinks that it was his drinking because he's been drinking a little bit more too, just like stressing out a little bit. So he goes back and he ends up just, staying the week over there in Albuquerque. He ends up going back next weekend. Everything still looks the same. The gate was locked because the weekend before he had painted it and he had went and bought a lock as well and stuff like that. So the gate was still locked. The paint was perfect. The windows were still busted out, of course. He had bought the windows before he showed up. So he replaced the windows. He asked Larry for help. Larry helped him. They replaced all the windows and stuff like that. He went back to the fireplace and tried to mix it around some more because it was kind of hard to hide. There was a bunch of char and stuff there. You could tell that something was there. So he tried to mix it around more, and then he ended up going back to Albuquerque figuring that, hey, everything will be done. The paint will be dry. The windows and everything will be all sealed. The fireplace, maybe the wind will freaking blow it away or whatever, He goes back to Albuquerque, and then they end up going and moving to Bernardo, John and Elizabeth. And they like it at first. John's still, he knows what happened, and he don't want Elizabeth to know. It's killing him. He wants to tell her too, because he's still terrified. He's been drinking more. He's been drinking a lot. John starts drinking about a fifth a day, and Elizabeth starts to notice. She don't like his character and the way he is. He's more aggressive. He's meaner. He's more grouchy. He sleeps less. He don't eat as much. And she's just, getting tired of him too. And John's he's slowly going crazy. He's always worried about security. He's telling her, oh, I need to do security cameras. Maybe I want to get an electric fence. I need to do sensors. I want to do this. And Elizabeth's starting to wonder, like, what's going on and stuff like that. And he's just trying to keep as calm as he can, but he's showing it. His face shows it all. Elizabeth can tell that he's terrified, and she wants to know what it is. One night, John and Elizabeth were just sleeping, and they hear a loud bang, like a gunshot. Terrified, they wake up. John looks at the clock. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he looks outside. It appears to be light outside, so John goes and he opens the curtain, and he looks out, and he sees a fire again, right in the same spot where the last one was. Terrified, John grabs his rifle and he runs outside. He notices the fire's in the same spot. He's like, what the hell's going on, man? So John runs to his garage to see if anyone's in the garage, because he knows, no one was in the trailer or anything. He goes in the garage. He turns the lights on. Right when he turns the lights on, he notices another goat head hanging on his engine cherry picker. Terrified, John runs back inside. He tells Elizabeth what was going on, what he found. He said, hey, there's a fire out there with the round rock formation, same as last time. She didn't know about the first time, but he was like, there's a round rock formation out there with a fire, and there's a goat head hanging from my engine cherry picker outside in the garage. And she don't believe him, so she goes out there with him, and she's terrified. She can't believe what she's seeing. She's like, it's like something out of a scary movie, She's like, she can't believe it. So she demands that John take her back to Albuquerque to her mom's that night. She demands, and John's kind of upset, but he understands. He's like, I kind of don't want you here either. It don't feel safe. So John and Elizabeth end up driving back to Albuquerque. They stay at her mom's that night. John stays as well. The next morning, John wakes up, and he insists that he needs to go back to Bernardo to check on everything. He's like, the fire was still going when we left. It wasn't too close to any buildings, but I still need to make sure everything's fine. We didn't even lock up. We just left. We were scared, So John, he ends up telling Elizabeth that he needs to go back, and they kiss. He leaves, and little does Elizabeth know that this is the last time she'll ever see John again. A few days go by, and Elizabeth is worried because John hasn't called. He hasn't came back, nothing. And this isn't like John. John would call Elizabeth. If they weren't together, he would call her every night to make sure that she was safe. And he hasn't called her, nothing. So Elizabeth is worried. She asks her mom if she can borrow her car. Her mom agrees. She drives to Bernardo. And when she arrives, she notices the gates open the same way John would open it. He has it tied. He has a bungee cord tied up to the fence so the wind won't shut it, and stuff like that. And she's a little more relieved because she sees John's truck parked right in front of the trailer right there. So she goes and drives in. She gets out. She goes inside the trailer and she screams, John! John! And John's not responding. She don't know where John is. So confused, she's like, maybe he's in the garage. She goes to the garage, but the garage is locked. And the way it's built, it has a lock that you open, 2 of them. But the main one is 2 boards that close, and it's pretty much just a master lock that goes on it, and you need a key to open it. So there's no way John's inside of it. He wouldn't have been able to lock himself in. So she still goes to the trailer and she retrieves a key that she knows that John has hidden. And she opens it. And to her surprise, there's nothing in there no more. The goat head's gone. And as a matter of fact, the fireplace, the pits, the rocks, everything's gone from the night that they were there. Everything's just vanished, including John. She don't know where John is. So terrified, she calls the police. She's like, hey, I need to do a missing person report. John's missing. And they're like, unfortunately, we can't do nothing. He's a grown man. He hasn't been gone for more than 72 hours. We really can't do nothing about it. So she's upset, she goes back to Albuquerque and she's just waiting for John, and months go by and year goes by. And eventually she's like, I don't know what happened to John, and she sells the property. And she would never hear from John again. And it drove her crazy. Elizabeth went crazy, and her mother ended up passing. She took care of her mother until she passed, and it was crazy how she took care of her mom because she could barely take care of herself. She would use the restroom on herself and everything like that. And her mom ended up passing, and she got admitted to a mental hospital. And she stayed there. And she stayed there. And as a matter of fact, she's still there to this day. She's still in mental care. She's still alive, and she's crazy. She don't know what happened to John, and to this day, no one else knows what happened to John. John just went missing. They don't know if it was the cult, what it was, but the goat head and everything, when she went back, the fireplace, everything was gone. It was just like it was brand new again when they had first originally bought the property and first moved everything in. But no John. So we don't know whatever happened to John, and no one may never will. John just went missing. What's up, New Mexico? It's your boy Tiger. I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. I'm gonna need you guys to like and subscribe, man, on Facebook, like and share. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I just want you guys to know some of the stories are fiction, some of them are non-fiction. I'm gonna keep bringing you guys more content. I'm just working on getting more cameras. Once I get those cameras, we're gonna be going out. We're gonna be hitting those streets, man. I'm gonna be showing you guys the homelessness. I'm gonna be showing you guys all the cruises. I'm gonna be showing you guys everything, man. I hope you guys enjoy. So please like and subscribe, man. Stay tuned.